Thanks, Nigel, and good morning, everybody. Good morning to those of you online as well. I'm not Yen, as you can see. Yen is my co-lead on A4I, and I'm very pleased to have a person lead this with me, but she's sick today, so I'm going to cover some of it as well. I'm going to give you a quick run through of what's happening at Innovate UK, and many of you will know what we do, and you'll have seen it before, but it's good to give an introduction. So we are the UK's innovation agency. We work across business to try and help businesses innovate to support growth in those businesses and the economy as a whole. And the important thing about this sort of vision slide that Innovate uses generally is that for A4I, the program that we're here to talk about today, productivity and competitiveness aspects of that mission are most important. The economics unit at Innovate UK give me this slide. It's really a check that what we're doing is working, and it certainly is. Before there was an innovation agency back in 2007, the government used to try and get a similar thing from Whitehall. And in those days, things would get about £3 back. Nowadays, we get between 8 and 30 pounds back per pound invest. I think that's due mainly to lots of things, but mainly because people like me who've done R&D industry before they recruited to Innovate UK understand a bit about how that works and what's in the industry and what doesn't work. So I think that's a good match. We are the innovation agency for the UK. People don't realise that we do a lot of stuff around the globe as well, though, and increasingly we put people in other countries in order to try and encourage collaborative R&D with those companies in those other countries. Particularly India and China, we now have Innovate UK employees based there day to day, talking to governments there about how we do support R&D innovation and trying to make sure that we can work with them in the future. One of the things that's changed recently from April last year was that we formed UK Research and Innovation. We didn't form it, the government did, and it's a new organisation which makes up all of the research councils, Innovate UK, and a part of HEFCE that used to do funding for higher education. This brings all of the funding agencies under one organisation. I'm now an employee of UKRI, UK Research and Innovation, rather than just Innovate UK. But the important thing about the Bill of Parliament that brought that body into being is that each of the constituent parts maintains its own identity and purpose. That is written into the Act of Parliament, and so Innovate UK continues to lead on business-led innovation in the UK, as does, you'll hear from STFC later on, they're also part of this, and they retain their role by the Act. So it's not that it's changing what we do, it just makes it easier to do things once between us, and to simplify some of the administration and stuff. But I think it is good because it allows us to do even more under the same sort of administrative processes and budgets and things that we really want to do anyway, which is to co-fund where we can, and A4I will see a great example of that. Another thing that's been important recently, for some time now actually, is the industrial strategy. Government produces a lot of documents, particularly about our topic at the moment, but they did publish the industrial strategy some while back, and that was a real change, because not only was it a document, but it came with new money. Over 3 billion over 5 years, extra money for research and innovation, and that hasn't happened, certainly in my lifetime, before that. So a lot of extra new money, and a strategy that says, when I joined in 2011, what was then Technology Strategy Board and precursor for Innovate UK, government used to give us a very small amount of money by comparison and say go and do good things with it in business for innovation. We did, and now with the publication of the industrial strategy, they give us a lot more money and they have a little bit more say and more interventionist policy about what we're doing. That's great because it means that there's more money for everything and we can do more. So you will see that, as I'll come on to in a moment, that quite a lot of our competitions and support for business now comes through that extra money, and and the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. So there is a fund associated with that strategy. It's not just a document on the shelf, and that extra money is being released in waves over to 2021. So actually, it's a good thing. Government often doesn't do things across multiple years. And I think for business planning, it's I wish for something else they did planning over multiple years, but certainly for business innovation, now we have a strategy that's in place over multiple years, and I think that's good for business because it allows people to plan when you can take the support and actually grow. So it's based around different challenges. It's challenge-led. These are based on where government has determined that the UK is either strong already and needs to retain that leading position in the world, or where we're very close to being the leader and we can get used to being the leader. This manifests itself into a number of different challenges in waves. As I say, the money is not released all at once. That fund is being released in waves. We're now around wave 3. Just to give you an idea of the sorts of challenges that were funded in wave 1, you can see there. And again, example, medicines manufacturing technologies. We're really strong in biotech in the UK. We have clusters in biotech that the world doesn't have for these new therapies. I don't just mean medicines like pills that you take, I mean therapies where you implant cells into the body that do good, replace damaged ones. And that sort of thing, we want to be the leaders in delivering the therapy as well as just inventing it. So that's why, for example, the strategy says one of the first challenges that we looked at was how can we build the basis for manufacturing and delivering those new therapies in the UK and taking advantage of the leading biotech that we've already got. And that goes for a lot of the other challenges as well. We don't have time to go through more here. In wave 2, these were the challenges, again, just to give you a rough idea. But I won't dwell on those today. They're all on the website, and there's a link to the industrial strategy insight pack if you want to follow that later. What I really want to concentrate on, just for the last few minutes of this section, is what's the landscape for funding opportunity today, because I think that's probably what most people want to know about. So there is the Industrial Strategy Challenge Fund. So if you see a competition on our website, and you will quite a lot now, that say ISCF, blah, blah, blah. ISCF means it's that new extra money based on the industrial strategy, the sort of strategic work that Nigel just alluded to the KTM doing, is part of organising the stakeholder meetings to determine what those challenges should be for future waves of funding. And I've just covered what the waves so far. We're now at wave 3, comes before, so look out for announcements on that soon. But you will see a sequence of these competitions based on ISCF. I'm just coding it for you now, really. If you see that on the website, that's the new money, that's the new funding, and it's based on those challenges and the criteria that goes with all of those ICF competitions. But that's not the whole story, because clearly challenge-led means that you've got to have a company that's involved or an organisation that's involved in some way to do with those particular topic areas. And that might not be you. I hope it is, because there's lots of money there. I encourage you to follow ICF funding where you can. But that's not the whole story. So we also offer what we call responsive programs. Now, I hate the word because it's what our teams who administer the stuff see as that we respond to your ideas of what we should fund, is what it means. Essentially, it's an open program, so it doesn't have scope. We don't say you have to be in this sector or in this technology area or whatever to get funding. And there are different ways that the open program manifests itself. One is KTP, which I highlighted on the slide. The reason I highlighted that this year is because Philip Hammond, when he did his last budget, gave us an extra 25 million for KTP specifically, over and above what we were already spending on that program. So if you want to find out about Knowledge Transfer Partnership, KTP, it's been around longer than most of us, 40 odd years, and it's a very successful program, bringing collaborations between academics and industry. And if you want to find out more about that, we're going to bring you to that, me and Nigel. But there is substantial money there this year for KTP, so it's worth highlighting that. You'll also have seen a new SMART program opened recently, and that's another example of responsive where there's no scope restriction. You can bid into that with any idea for funding, but they do have to be good. So the SMART schemes are always, because they're open in scope, they're always very, very popular. So you need to be in the top quartile there with your idea in order to get funded. Then we have other competitions. We have an investor program. We have attempts now to do more things than we did before. So whereas before we've just given grants, now we give loans as well. We've done a few pilot competitions with loans, and people ask me, why are you doing loans? Well, two reasons. One, the government gave us extra money to use as loans. So that seems like a good idea to use that rather than give it back. But the other reason, the real reason I like them, is because they complement grants very well. I've been in a lot of final meetings where I give a grant from a company, they've had a grant from us, they've done some excellent work, they've built prototypes, they've proved the concept, they've done the early work on something. And I sat in that meeting opposite the CEO, and I said to him, well, what do you need now? How can we help now? And he's looked back at me and he said, we just want to get it in the marketplace now and sell it. We need enough money just to get us out there so we can manufacture it, build this stuff, or deliver it, whatever, launch it, and make profit. And I said, that's great. Unfortunately, I don't really have any schemes that can help with that, because our funding schemes are subject to state aid rules, and one of the state aid rules is that the closer you are to market, the less percentage we can give you, the more you have to match fund yourself. And if it gets to the point of you pay 90% and us giving you a 10% grant, that's no good to you, and it's no good to us in terms of the cost of doing it, so we never do it. And that's the problem. But now, a loan can fill that gap for some companies who are in the right position very, very nicely, because you make a shed load of money by launching this thing, you've got the capital you need to do it, and you can make more profit than the cost of the loan, and the loans are very good. So, you won't find an interest rate quite like, I think it's the lowest the government could offer without losing money on it. And you can have up to 10 years sometimes to pay it back, which is an extremely long, generous time frame for innovation. So the loans fill a gap that I couldn't offer before to some companies, and I'm not allowed to encourage you to have a loan because there are regulations about that. But clearly, it does fit for some companies who are in the right position at the right time, who I could not help before with the grant, but I can help now from Innovate UK. We're also doing a lot around investors. We're trying to help investors in the UK, VCs, angels, others, to understand what we funded for. Because if government has funded something that's very promising, it can be an excellent opportunity for another investor afterwards. And it's not like the VC world in the States on the West Coast, where money is quite relatively easy to get hold of, and you can fail quickly and get some more and that sort of thing. It's a different culture here for funding and investment, we know that. But we do have some really good investors in the UK, and we want to work more closely with them so that they understand where the promising aspects are in the UK and promising companies that they can get in touch with. So we do work with investors. We're also trying to do work with companies they're interested in, so that our Dragon's dead, although this is a real entertainment. The companies are prepared better to be in front of those investors and more successful as a result. So we do work on both of those sides of things. We also do regional programs because it's important where NEPs, virtual private partnerships, and others are doing innovative type support for business, that we get in there and try and support that too. We can make our market go further if it's in a cluster of companies in a particular region. So that's why we do regional programs, and encourage you to look out for those in your region as well. We also do international things. I alluded to the pretty innovative guys and girls in different countries around the world to try and stimulate R&D and collaboratively with other countries. But we have a lot of activity going on with international type competitions, whether it be missions, where we take companies that have won something in a cohort in a particular technology area, for example, to another country where they will meet investors, suppliers, and supply chains, potentially, and get to know them. And we also do a lot of other overseas work with money that isn't from our normal government department. So, for example, the digital overseas aid type of budget can be used sometimes to solve a problem in a developing part of the world with a company that's innovative in the UK. It's got some technology that can not solve that problem. So look out for international competitions as well. And we call those different type competitions new. I don't know why we chose that name. But I think again, I just encoded for you now in case you see that on the website. That's what we do. But we also run some odd competitions. We run some ones that are different. We run competitions for other government departments that are good at, it's got some money, and then we stimulate something in other areas in the OT to do some transport stuff in a particular topic or whatever, but they don't run competitions very well. So they make us run for them, and we love to do that because that's more widens the pot and widens the scope. We like working with our organisations to do that as well. We do all new competitions, and that leads nicely into the analysis of Innovators program, because I cannot run that both without the help of the executive team and also the partners that are involved in A4I. So that's the Innovate UK. We'll take any questions on everything that we get in the Q&A. So multiple questions if you've got any particular questions about Innovate UK and things I've said there. So about analysis for innovators. I think one's very lucky actually when you get up in the morning, you go to work and you enjoy what you do. It's really important. I'm really lucky because I do that. And I wouldn't be involved with this program if I didn't believe it was a really good thing. We tried it a few years ago now. I invented it. I've given the choice of the chance to come up with something different. And we have come up with something different, and now we can look back on it over a couple of years and see that it really does work. It really does help companies with problems. It really does help their bottom lines. It helps them do things they couldn't do before. And I like that. So that's why I'm here doing this today. My day job is actually emerging technologies at Innovate UK. It's nothing to do with A4I. But I spend most of my time doing A4I now because I think this is the right thing to do. So, analysis for innovators. I still put up on the side that this is a completely different type of innovation program, and it is. It's very, very different to everything else what we do at Innovate UK. I'm going to tell you why. So the first reason it's very different is because it's focused on problem solving. We don't normally do that. We normally ask you in all of our other schemes to come along and write a proposal for a piece of work you want to do for something new and innovative, new product or service that you want to introduce. And it's so innovative that you need to come and help to get it out there, to do the R&D. That's what we normally do, and A4I is not like that. For A4I, you have to have an existing problem with what you do, in your process or your services. We try and help you solve that problem you haven't been able to solve so far. It's also, as I alluded to at the beginning about the mission slide, it's about productivity and competitiveness. I want to solve problems with A4I that affect your bottom line, that affect you being productive. If you've got waste in your process, if you've got a product that you sell perfectly happily and make profit from, you could make more profit if you didn't waste 5% of them on the production line every time you run it. Or if you could make the spec a little bit better so that you could sell it to a lot more people and different customers. That's what I want to help with A4I. Right? It's not for new things, it's to try and increase your productivity and competitiveness, to do things that are better than your competitors, and to do things more productively. The UK has a productivity gap, and that's what I'm trying to help with this scheme. I'm trying to do it on the basis of really helping individual companies on the long run. As I said, most of our schemes, our other schemes, are all about you doing some R&D. The beauty of A4I is that we have partners that can help you with that. So this A4I program brings in companies to Innovate UK that cannot apply to our other schemes. And the reason is because you don't have to have an R&D lab that can solve the problem. That's the whole point of A4I. We bring the lab to you. And so it opens up the possibility, even though you haven't got the expert scientists or the lab or the facilities or whatever, that you can solve problems that are giving you their productivity and competitiveness issues. And that's why A4I is different again. So I hope you've seen by now, this is actually a really different type of program, aimed at a different purpose, aimed at something real. And that's why I like it so much. It's also different about collaboration. Normally, if you write a project proposal to be funded by us, you write in part of it, we want to work with X, Y, and Z company or organisation, and they need this much money, and we need that much money in grant. And together we're going to do these different things, and we'll have this end result. So you choose your partner that you work with. In A4I, you don't. In A4I, you just give us the problem, and we find the partners that have got solutions for you, and make you more than one. That's very different. believe me, that broke all the processes at Innovate UK when I tried to launch this first time, because they hadn't had another program where we assigned partners before, and where the partners that we work with bring their own money to fund some of their work. Because that's normally everybody wants to run from us, right? We can't. That didn't work at all. So I had to battle a little bit to get that shaped nicely for our systems, and now it does. Ish. So what are these programs? What are these problems that I'm talking about? What sort of problems can you come to A4I with? Well, it's a very, very wide scope. What I've tried to do on this slide is show you that it can be biological, chemical, physical, and even computing. All right, so this is a lot of different types of problem. And innovation leads like me are supposed, when we launch a competition, we're supposed to come up with a kooky paragraph that defines what the scope is. It's really hard for this, because this can encompass so many different types of problems. If you're just running a competition for robotics to do undersea exploration, it's pretty easy to write a scope statement for that. For A4I, attacking any competitiveness and productivity problem, it's not so easy. So I have had a go there at what it's about. It's essentially about, as I said before, we want the problems from your companies, your organizations, where it's going to make a difference to the bottom line, where it's going to make a difference to your productivity and competitiveness, and where it's going to be about something that you don't understand. Maybe you've had this problem for years. It's a nitty-gritty thing that always has affected your production line. Maybe you make widgets, and you make lovely widgets, and you sell them, and you make profit from them, but you have to throw 5% of them away. Your raw materials aren't reliable all the time. Your spec's not quite up to it to sell it to multiple different sectors. It's those sorts of problems that I want you to come to A4I with in any of those technical areas. It's much easier for Innovate UK folks like me when we launch competitions to say what's not in scope. Because saying something in scope until you've written it down, I can't tell you what's in scope. You might write yourself out even though you had a really good idea to begin with. And that's soul destroying actually when we run other types of program, people write a really good proposal, but they don't write down why they're in scope. I can't help you with that. But a few of those go by the wayside. So what I'm saying here is make sure that you express your problem in the way that I ask you to, and that it should hit one of these four areas. So it's easier to say what's out of scope. Basically in A4I, the sorts of problems that are out of scope are if you could solve this yourself by going down to a supplier off the high street or the lab and just say, do a bit of gas chromatography and show me what's going on here. Or do a bit of infrared spectroscopy on this and tell me what's going on inside this material or something so that I can see what's happening. If you can get the result from simple, non-cutting edge approaches like that, then don't use A4I to try and do it on the chip. Be perfectly frank. Right? That's not what A4I is about. If you know that that's the case, then don't bother to apply. If you've got a problem and you don't know that that's the case, if you honestly don't know how to look at this problem, and that's where most of the problems have come from in our previous rounds, if you really don't know, if you're not sure, put it in anyway. It doesn't cost you much. It costs you the time to tell us the problem. I'll come on to that in a moment. And you will likely sit down with a world-class scientist who will explain that you could use one of these off-the-shelf techniques. Or you'll get the answer back in a feedback saying, sorry, you weren't in scope because it was, we've looked at it with all our scientists and they all believe that you could solve it by taking this approach. So you've got an answer for your problem just by putting it in for nothing. Right? You might not be in scope, but you still get an answer. That's very different from our other competitions. Usually you don't get any value much apart from the feedback, but you don't get the sort of quality feedback that we can give you in this program. And I have to say something about software because my own area is software. I'm a software computer scientist by trade. And A4I is not a program to develop you an app. If your problem is that you need an app to do something, go out and find a software developer that can develop it for you. There's lots out there and they'll do it for you. That's it. This is not subsidized software development. But if you have a problem and you don't understand data about it, and the data is so big you can't do it in an Excel spreadsheet, one of our partners has access to the biggest supercomputer in the UK, and that has opportunities that can solve problems and do analyses and the sorts of investigations along with the scientists, the experts that can use it. Right? You don't have to know how to program it either. By that, they can solve problems. So compute problems are not out of scope. AI type problems are not out of scope, but it can't be that you just need a bit of software developed already. So, just to lay this be very, very clear about this. Normally, in one of our programs, you write a project proposal. In A4I, you don't. We just want your problems. We want to know what problems you want us to solve with you. And we don't want solutions either. It's very easy to get into solution space when you're talking about your problems. We really don't want the solution. You shouldn't probably know the solution if it's an A4I type problem, otherwise you'd have done it already. But we do want a value, and that's not a value of how much grant you want. Again, it's very, very different than A4I. What I want from you is an estimate, and it is just an estimate, of what value that solving this problem would have to your company. Would it allow you to access new markets, new customers? If so, what value? Guess, estimate. If it would save you money on wastage or disposal of bits that don't come off the production line properly, then tell us how much that costs and how much you'd save by solving that problem. Add all those things together and come up with an estimate. I just give you a bit of general advice here. When you apply to any of our competitions, if one of the questions on the form says quantify, please put a number in. Assessors really hate it if people write very large or something like that. It doesn't go down well, it doesn't make your proposal very good. Similarly, in this one, I don't want it very large, I want you to estimate and show a bit of working on the back of the envelope. So all you've got to do is just say, look, we think it's about this and about that much. And what I want to do, this is not about seeing whether you win the competition or not. This is to help me go back to government and say, this scheme really works, it's really different, I know, but it works because we're saving people real money. And I also want to do it to validate just what you think it's going to solve, right? Because if your normal turnover and stuff that we look at on Companies House says that you turn over about 20k a year or something, and you say that solving this problem in your business is going to save you 40 billion, I might raise an eyebrow. Similarly, if a multinational applies to this and does make billions a year and they say it's going to make 20k's difference, then I'm not so interested in that one either, right? So I want you to have some idea. I've said I want to solve your productivity and competitive problems. This is where you can show me that it does solve a productivity problem, saves you some money. But it's not a gateway apart from that. It's just for me to try and understand that I'm solving the right types of problem. So a problem and a value. So the problem statement has to be done using a short 3-minute video, up to 3 minutes. Not very long. I want you to show our scientists what your problem is. If you've got something that breaks, something that cracks, something that doesn't work, something that doesn't look right, show them on the video. It'll be much easier than trying to write it down in a paragraph, I promise you. With problem solving, this is the way to do it. We found it works really well, put it in front of scientists and they can look at it and say, I don't know what's going on there. We want as much information as possible, so you can write a paragraph as well about the problem. You need to write that value down as well. You need to give us the URL and the password for the video so that only we can look at it. Because it's about your problem, remember, so we do keep it confidential. And you do need to estimate that value and put that down. And we also like you to tell us what you've tried before. Because if you've tried something and it didn't work, that's actually good information for the scientists to understand, right? Because the result of what happened when you try to solve it that way will often point to a better way to do it. So that again, that's not scored in the sense for your application. It's because I want you to give me this information to give our world-class scientists and experts the best chance of finding a solution to your problems. The more I can do that, the more I can fund. So that's what we need to do at the expression of interest. My folks at STFC call this an expression of interest stage, because that's what we normally do for the other competitions. This differs in that I'm not doing a 2-phase competition here, 2 stages, because I want to narrow down the numbers. I'm doing it because I need to understand the problems before I can see whether we can solve them with the project, right? So this is not 2-phase for the same reason, again, as any other program we do. It's because I need to understand the problems. Just to get that absolutely right. Yes, I need to weed out the ones that are not analysis and moving problems that we can solve. I mean, if if you run a haulage company and you just need more lorries, I can't help with that. It's not a procurement problem. That's just that's the scoping thing. But apart from the scope, there's no reason why you shouldn't get really good feedback, really good help by sitting down, almost, I can't say, but a really useful discussion with world-class experts about how to solve your problem. Whether you decide to go ahead and do a project or not. You don't get that sort of opportunity with the first phase of any other competition. So, is Joe here? Was that after? No, okay, right. So I'm going to tell you a little bit now about how the process goes. I'm going to talk about what happens at phase one in this competition. So at phase one, what I do is I get to check whether you've actually met the scope of the competition, as I've just said. Is it an application development piece of software or not? Is it out of scope for those reasons? Is it something that meets the scope of the competition? I then put it in front of some experts who will understand, is this something that you could do off the shelf? Is it something that needs the caliber and the expertise and the cutting edge facilities of the partners we bring to this program, or could it be done more simply? If it can, you get the feedback, and that's fine. I also look at the values just to check, as I said before, that they are sensible, commensurate with your size and turnover. And also, of course, the partners that are potentially working with you on these need to show it to their chief scientists to understand who's got a potential solution to your problem. And out of that, we understand whether we can offer you partners to work with on the problem. Assuming that there is a partner, at least one of the four, and there usually is, I'm just amazed at the scope of the problems that we've been able to help with so far on this program. They range beyond my expectations, but it comes down to the caliber of the scientists who have involved. If you've had a successful phase one, then it goes into a session that we call brokerage. It's almost, I call it dating sessions on this, but it's effectively where Nigel works his magic in the KTN. He said he does more on A4I than any other program, and it's because we need this process. We need to be able to take the problems that you've given us, match you with the scientists that think they've got answers to those problems, and put you in a room together so you can discuss A, how to approach it, and B, whether it's suitable to go ahead with the project in phase two. So Nigel works his magic wand and somehow arranges multiple confidential meetings one-to-one between you and the partners that have got scientists that can help. And I think he had 140 meetings in 3 days to organise last time between companies and scientists, and that's no mean thing. So I think he stays up all night despite me asking him not to. So that's what happens with the brokerage. And then really you get the chance to talk to these companies about what they're doing and what you can do to help. So you can prepare a project. This is about phase two. We're not really here to talk about phase two today, because if you get to this point, right, if you get beyond the brokerage, we will brief you separately on how all this works. I just want to give you a flavour of the journey. So you've had a productive brokerage session. You're working with the partner scientist teams to prepare project proposals. They will support you in that, but you lead it as the company. And then you submit this collaborative project proposal, and it is a collaborative proposal. It's not for you to log your problem over the wall with the scientists to go away and solve it and log the answer back. Right? I can only fund collaborative R&D, that's what April say. So it has to be a real collaboration between you and the partners. You need to work with them, you need to visit their place, you need to take them samples or whatever you've agreed is going to happen. Where you do some work on this and they do some work on this, and together you both learn and you both do something that solves the problem. You submit that proposal by the phase two deadline. We'll come to the deadlines and the dates later. And we then take that into what is now a normal process for us, like any of our other competitions. We take a proposal with you and the partner into an assessment process, 5 independent assessors, they score them all. Hopefully they score you above where the money runs out, or I draw the line. I rank them in the scoring list. And we fund as many of you as we can to work with these expert scientists from the partners and hopefully solve the problems. There are two aspects to the funding on this. Because it's very different, because the partners bring some funding from the same source of government that we do, there are two elements to the funding. We'll probably pick this up in the Q&A, but if you're successful in the competition, phase 2, effectively you get a grant based on your size. It's normally about the size and the type of work you're going to do. The type of work you do is, for the problem solving, this is the same for all projects, so it's the maximum we can give you for that type of work. So it comes down to your grant is percentage is based on your size of company. So if you're a small company, you get 70% grant. If you're a medium-sized company, you get 60%, and if you're a large company or multinational, you get 50% grant. But after the project, because you've had free money effectively through the partner for their part in it, you have to make a contribution to the partner as well. That's the different bit. That's the bit that makes this different. And it's the same match funding. So if you've had 70%, you need to find 30% of the costs of the partner. If you've had 60% grant, you need to find 40%. If you've had 50, it's 50-50. And that's the way that we can run this and still abide by the state aid laws. Eligibility, we'll cover this again a bit later, but only businesses can apply to this. Only businesses have the sorts of problems that are in scope for this. If you're a university or another research organisation, you don't have the sort of problem that I've explained with your bottom line productivity and competitiveness, so it's businesses only. And you don't apply with any partners. Even if you think somebody else can help you with this, go and do it with them outside of A4I. But don't come to A4I with a partner. We find the partner for you. Business can be of any size. I explained how that affects your grant just now. You must carry out the work on this in the UK. I'm using UK taxpayers' money, so I can't fund things that are going to happen overseas. And obviously you have to be prepared to work with at least one of the 4 participating partners. Because we've run this multiple times now, there are additional eligibility clauses for people who've been in multiple rounds. But first, if you're a business, you can submit more than one application to this round. In fact, you can submit up to 2, but they must relate to a different problem. It's no good writing 2 proposals, writing 2 problems down in different ways where it's actually the same problem. You'll spot that. Okay, so 2 different problems is okay. 1 problem expressed 2 different ways, put in twice in. That's not playing ball. And no more than 2 from 1 company. If you've submitted before to A4I, you can resubmit the same problem if it wasn't successful before, again, once in another round. So if you've had 1 go before, you can resubmit in this round. If you've had 2 goes before with that problem, you must use a different problem. If you've already been involved and undertaken a project in more than 1, so 2 or more projects in A4I competitions previously, then you're not eligible to apply to phase 1 of this competition, this round. I want to widen this to allow as many companies to take part as possible, and it is a very popular competition. So if you've already had 2 successful projects, then not this time, please. But there is an exclusion to that, an exception to that, if you like. We did promise when we ran round 3 last time, this is round 4 coming up. When we ran round 3, it was under such tight timescales, and we only allowed 3-month maximum projects. It was too short for many people to be able to solve the problem. So we promised that there would be an opportunity to extend the same problem, not a different one, with the same partners, into round 4. We will allow you to do that at phase 2, but you don't need to apply to phase 1 if you're in that category. If you've got a round 3 that you're extending, we know who you are, we know the problem, we know the partner, so we don't need you to do phase 1. And there's various other requirements on that. When we get to your final project meeting for round 3, we need to know that we've made some progress in round 3 to be able to extend it. But you can talk to us about that if you're in that category. If you remember previous rounds of this, people who've already seen this before, Just a few changes from last time. We change this each time we run it, just to try and make it better, to learn more about how it runs. This time we've acted up to 12-month projects. We shouldn't need more than 12 months to solve a problem. If we can't solve it in that time with the partners we've got, then it's not going to happen. We have made the projects potentially bigger this time, up to £300,000 total project cost this time. Although I expect most to be around 90 to 120, because that's how much we found it takes to run a project to solve these sorts of problems. So I'm not being any more directed from that, but if there is something that's particularly large that you need to do that needs an expensive resource or something, then we've scaled up the total size of the project when complete this time. I'm trying to gradually scale up this program. It started as small pilots, and I'm trying to make it bigger in different ways each time. This is the way I'm making it bigger this time, is to make the project cost bigger. It uses our online submission system, innovation funding system, IFS. Last time there was almost no time to put your application in. I'm amazed how many applications we got on the basis of that. Nigel and the partners and myself were up all night and weekends trying to make sure that people would get their funding applications in. This time we have more time, so we shouldn't be doing that, folks. More time for brokerage this time, more time to prepare proposals for phase 2, so that should be less rush as well. Simpler funding this time. Last time we had a de minimis funding option, and I won't bore people who are not sure what de minimis means. It's a funding system for small projects. Because I'm raising the size of the projects this time, de minimis isn't applicable. So there's no de minimis funding this time. It's a simple 50, 60, 70% grant, like I said before. That makes it much simpler to understand much funding, and it would be hard to fund de minimis projects anyway in round 4 if they're bigger projects, because it's normally up to 50k projects. And as I said before, funding from partners for their work, which is matched by companies on the same basis of size, 50, 40 or 30. So here are the key dates that you need to understand. Again, all this is in the slide pack that will be sent to you, but we opened the competition on Monday. We're here on the 27th today doing this event. The entry deadline for getting your problem into the system, is the 20th of March at noon. Please, I mean noon. I don't mean 1 minute past noon or 5 minutes past noon. I mean noon. Preferably put it in the previous day. It's not our concern if you can't get on the internet and do it online. Press the button in time for noon. I've told you now it's noon, so you know it's noon. You know it's noon. That's okay. No panic, it's noon on the 20th of March. We will then notify you about your problem. Was it in scope? Was it out of scope? Could you just do this? Do you need do you need the A4I program? If not, try this. We'll give you that feedback and notify you from the 9th of April. And from the very next day, Nigel will be diligently looking at diaries to try and organise invites to those brokerage sessions. We need those to happen as quickly as possible. However, I can do many things at Innovate UK, and I can do many things with A4I, but I cannot move Easter. And Easter is in the middle of this period this time. So Nigel will be doing his best to avoid the week of Easter, Good Friday, and the week of Easter Monday. It may be that most of those meetings take place in the week following the week of Easter Monday. If you're just closed, if your company doesn't operate during that particular time, or you're all abroad or something, don't bother applying. We can't move brokerage. Nigel has a big enough job to try and make these sessions work as it is without trying to do custom dates for brokerage. But he will try and make as many adjustments as possible to make it possible for people to meet with our partners. We'll do what we can. So the brokerage sessions will be late April to early May. That's what we can say at the moment. And the phase 2 deadline, again at noon, I don't need to say that again, do I? At noon is the 5th of June. So you've got plenty of time there to discuss with partners, to start writing a proposal with them, to co-author it, to get input online from the partner when you need it, particularly for the technical approach to the R&D, if they're doing a lot of the R and you're doing a lot of the D and stuff. You can work that out, work packages out, cost it all. You've got plenty of time to do that and get that in by the 5th of June. I think we gave people a couple of weeks, or if that, a week and a half last time, because the timescales were so compressed. And it was either that or don't run it and lose the money, so I decided it'd be better to run it quickly than lose the money. I don't like giving money back to the government if I can use it for business. So 5th of June, that's the phase 2 deadline. But you don't need to worry about that yet. What you need to do now is focus on, have you got a problem that's in scope? Can we help with this through A4I? And if we can, express that problem as best you can. If you're successful at phase 2, the earliest you could start the project would be the 2nd of September. And obviously, if it's a 12-month project, I don't expect more to be 12 months. If it was, then you'd have to finish by the 28th of August the following year. If it's less than 12 months, you can fit within that window, but you can't start really, really late because it throws all the money in the wrong places. So in summary, this is the 4th round of this now very popular competition, a completely different type of funding program. If you haven't seen how this is different from what I've said so far, then you really need to think before you put an application in, because I've tried to explain this is for a different purpose, with a different aim, a different process, and different funding. We've learned from the format of earlier rounds, we've made it better and bigger as we go along, and I hope to do that again. This is a focus on existing industry problems. It's not a problem that you have in order to develop a new product, right? Heads off one of the questions usually. This is about existing processes that have problems, existing products that have problems, or existing services that have problems. And problems that address business productivity and competitiveness that you can tell me about through that value that I asked you for earlier. There's a very wide scope of measurement and analysis techniques we can bring to understanding the problems. And we are supported by 4 world-class partner organisations for whom, without whom I couldn't run this programme. It's a 2-phase competition with quite generous funding options. I don't think you can get access to the sorts of facilities you're going to hear about and the expertise you're going to hear about from the partners through any other mechanism, even with the slightly convoluted funding, match funding. And what I want you to, as I said before, what I want you to focus on now is problem, not solution, problem. What's your problem statement and the value to solve for success at phase 1? If you can do that, you stand a good chance of getting something out of this programme. And good luck with your entries. I think we're going to have a short break now.
Yeah. We may have a sort of short break, but we're running a bit late.
Back into the room. Okay, so it's my pleasure next to introduce the partners on this this programme. I keep talking about these expert scientists and partners and the facilities and whatnot. It's better that you hear about it from them. The 4 partners are MPL, STFC, NML, LGC, and NEL, and they're all here today to tell you a bit about the sorts of things they've done before on this programme as well, which really gives you a feel, I hope, for what. Okay, so first up today, it's Rick from STFC, and thanks, Rick.
Thank you very much. Morning, everybody, and good morning to everybody who's online. So my name is Rick Allett. I'm Business Development Director at STFC, and I look after space and technology and all the facilities. So it basically means like everything that happens at the Rutherford Appleton site that we operate comes under me, and a little bit up in Edinburgh at the Astronomy Technology Centre as well. So now STFC is a large and complex beast, and describing it in 10 minutes is probably a problem worthy of analysis for Innovators programme, to be honest with you. So for those of you who don't know that STFC doesn't stand for Swindon Town Football Club, you may know or think of us as having a massive collection of very big, shiny facilities, which are located in 2 different areas of the country, essentially. And it's all about academic stuff, and it's all about pure research, and nobody ever gets a look in other than that. That's sort of right, and also completely wrong, because in fact, we do an enormous amount of work with industry, for industry, and supporting industry. And one of the things that we are absolutely mandated to do is to sweat those assets, those big shiny bits of kit, those amazing facilities, and the people, most importantly, that we employ in order to benefit UK and, again, UK taxpayers who bring in the money to do that. So this sort of program, with working with Jonathan and Innovate and KTN, is exactly the kind of thing that STFC are interested in doing. I have a corporate slide on UK research. I also work for UK Research and Innovation. Okay, so what we do is, what we mean by frontier science. So STFC is complex. It funds physics, astronomy, and nuclear physics by grants in the same way as the Engineering Physics Research Council, EPSRC, funds engineering and physical sciences type activity. So we are a grant-giving body. We fund academics to do their work in industry in those areas: particle physics, astronomy, nuclear. We also handle the subscription of the international facilities such as CERN, for example. So the money that the UK pays in comes through STFC, unfortunately straight back out the door again as well. So we're responsible for that sort of collaboration and that sort of integration of the international facilities across the globe. The other thing we do, which makes us completely different to the grant-giving bodies such as EPSRC, etc., is that we run what we call the national laboratories. So we have campuses, one based in Harwell in Oxfordshire and the other based at Daresbury in Cheshire. And those facilities, those campuses, sorry, house these facilities. And those facilities are complementary, and they are very large scale, and they are open for, as I say, academics, but also for industry to use. So the facilities consist of the central laser facility. We have the neutron and muon source. We have the X synchrotron diamond. You might have heard of diamond synchrotron. We operate that. And we also have RAL Space, which does a lot of work on technology and putting technology and developing technology for space type applications. We have a huge technology department which supports all of those facilities, but is also an independent department in terms of developing new electronics, developing new detectors, developing new systems such as cryogenics, cooling systems, etc., etc. So they have a support role for the facilities, but they also have a role in actually developing that technology independently and for the use of their systems. We also operate, and Jonathan mentioned this, a high-performance computing. We have the computing department, which again supports the facilities, but we also have something called Hartree, which is based at Daresbury, which is the high-performance computing center, which is entirely industry-facing. So there we can use the computing facilities to support industry. The next few slides will hopefully describe a little bit more about that. So what is our offer to industry? It's the opening up of these incredible facilities, which, as again Jonathan said, it's not an FTIR machine. It's an entirely different beast to that. But the key point being is the people in the middle there. So the value add is the experts and the expert scientists who are able to run those facilities and get the best out of those facilities by working alongside you as industry to get the best solutions that we can. The other thing that we do for industry is that we run campuses. So the campuses consists of companies which may want to just locate on the campus. For example, in Harwell, we have Ricardo, we have Element 6's UK R&D base, we have the European Space Agency UK Centre, all sorts of different things. So going from very large organizations to actually 1 to 2 people in business incubators. So we operate 3 business incubators, 2 in Harwell and 1 up in Daresbury as well. Daresbury, again, is a campus where these sort of companies locate and cluster together. The other thing we do is we operate clusters. So we have an energy cluster, we have a health tech cluster, and we have a space cluster. The space one's been going the longest and has something like 80 to 90 different organizations located at Harwell now. They are coming together because they see the value of that agglomeration effect of clustering together, but also the value of being on site with all of these different facilities and organizations and experts that are floating around in the coffee rooms. So the facilities, I can't go into the scientific detail of what these facilities can do, but so what I'd like to do is give you a take home, and the take home is that we operate at which go from atoms all the way up to aeroplane wings, and we operate in timescales which go from months in some cases all the way down to femtoseconds. So that's 10 to the minus 18 of a second, which is an incredibly short amount of time. And everything in between, essentially. So, and the takeaway line is it's about metrology, it's about analysis, and it's also about backing that up with high-performance computing, artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, handling big data. This picture here just shows there's the muon neutron source on the left and the diamond synchrotron X-ray source on the right. What you see in the middle, which is I always find very fascinating. Sorry, I can't do that because they won't be able to hear me anymore. That's a rose inside a lead casket. So if you took that picture with X-rays, you would see a nice black rectangle. But that has been taken using neutrons. And the neutrons fly through the lead and get stopped by the rose. So it's a complementary technique to X-rays, which will give you some really exciting information, but about different material sets. So just bear that in mind, that if you have a problem that you can't solve with X-rays, or you don't think you can solve with X-rays, or you don't even know whether you need X-rays, you may also benefit from using neutrons. So the sorts of things that they do in that is structural. Looking at this looks at surfactants in fuels, for example. We look at stress and strain in material components for the aerospace industry. We look at molecular dynamics, molecular conformations for the drugs industry, for example. And there's lots of examples in both the A4I and also what we call the Bridging for Innovators program, where we've assisted companies, a materials company looking at new catalysts. We can use these techniques to actually optimize how those catalysts work, increase the efficiency of those processes, and therefore the productivity of the system. So all sorts of different things to do. You can see it's also about advanced imaging of systems, one of the kind of larger bits of kit that has been imaged in the past. But we can image anything from, as I say, very small samples all the way through to very large samples. And to us, you'll have your problem, and it will be up to us to talk to you about where best to site that problem across the patch. So I talked about systems as well. The picture on the left-hand side is really quite cool in that it is an X-ray picture, but it's an X-ray picture which is generated by lasers. So the laser generates the X-rays, which then takes the image. And because it's generated by lasers, the pulse length of that X-ray pulse is actually just a few femtoseconds, which means that you can freeze frame any mechanical motion in time at all. And that's actually a picture of a turbo vacuum pump. And those blades spin at 50,000 revs per minute. You may not be able to make them out, but basically the blades are completely static in that picture. because in a few femtoseconds, they haven't moved anywhere, even at 50,000 revs. So that's an example of something you definitely cannot do with a piece of kit that sits on a table, but it's the kind of thing that we can help you with by engaging with STFC. Some of the technology outputs you can see here. I mentioned detectors and instrumentation, the cryogenic systems, computational science I also mentioned, and how we can integrate that across these different facilities, and also advanced optical systems. And some of the work that we do up at Daresbury is in accelerator science, but that also means vacuum technology, the best way of producing vacuum type materials, etc. So there's a whole technology outputs which can, and what that really means is that the expertise exists within STFC to help you with your technology issues and problems. So I think the final slide here is on the computational side. Really, STFC handles all of the data that comes out of CERN. That's a hell of a lot of data. So we know how to handle data, and we know how to analyze data. And we can do that through scientific computing department, but we can also do it, I think key to A4I is through the Hartree Centre, industry-facing computational centre. So it's high-performance computing, it's artificial intelligence, machine learning, data analytics, etc. So all of those are available to you through this programme. So I shall leave you with contacts here. I unfortunately have to leave at 12 o'clock because I need to be across London somewhere else, which I'm very sorry because it doesn't give me the chance to talk to you over lunch. But my colleague, who is here in the green jacket there, will be able to talk to you about what we can offer further in STFC. And you're more than welcome to drop us an email. So I think that's done.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. And just while we're swapping between partners here, remember, this is not a bidding contest. I'm asking all the partners to come up and talk to you about this because I want you to see the range of things available to look at problems, right? You don't have to understand anything about X-rays and neutrons. And if you've got something you can't see inside of, I bet these guys can, you know, maybe you haven't got enough neutrons flying around under control that you can see inside. I was just blown away when I saw what was possible the first time. I'm a computer scientist, so I've seen a few things, but you know, what these partners can bring to the table is utterly amazing. So next we have Lynn Hunter from NEL, and if I advance that, you've got a first slide.
I think we're still on morning, so good morning all. Start a little bit anxious here, 5 minutes. Right, so I'm Lynn Hunter, and I'm mainly overseeing our research programmes and also try to tame down the Glaswegian, a lot of our research partnerships with academia and across industry. So I'll take you on a quick tour around NEL. Now NEL's quite different from some of the other partners. We were a National Engineering Laboratory, government laboratory, established post-war 1947. And we're based up in East Kilbride in Scotland. Maybe not the best of places, East Kilbride, but you're about an hour from Loch Lomond if you ever fancy coming up. I don't think Nigel was overly impressed when we done our last roadshow in East Kilbride. It's a bit difficult to get to, but you're all welcome if you're up in that neck of the woods. So although we were privatised in the early 90s, we still retain the primary flow standards, the national standards for the UK for flow, predominantly flow measurement and density measurement. So within that capacity, we have a suite of world-class, which we would like to say world-class flow facilities. They're certainly the widest diverse class of flow facilities globally, certainly in our mind. And we are owned by two, which our headquarters are in Munich, and they have 24,000 employees worldwide. In East Kilbride, we have around about 80 scientists, engineers and researchers. Where am I hunting with this? Okay. It's an odd angle for a small person, but anyway. My glasses aren't correct. Right. So what do we actually do? Now, historically, we've been very predominant in the oil and gas sector, and a big part of that is because we supporting flow processes, control measurement, fiscal measurement, allocation measurement. Now, the oil and gas sector, whether we like it or not, still supplies about 8% of our energy. It will continue to do that for many decades to come. And it's an industry where it's very unique. It has very high impact risk for financial exposure, for fiscal taxation, also for environmental leakage, etc. If you look at some of the disasters that happened previously, and also for health and safety reasons. So it's a very, very high impact, high exposed area. So for that reason, metrology is extremely important. However, we are seeing a lot more newer sectors now where utilities, where obviously water's very valuable, and we're seeing a lot of leakage now occurring. So we're trying as a commodity prevent that from happening. We're now seeing the introduction of clean fuels such as hydrogen. Now that is, we're now pursuing a lot of activity in that area now, from domestic hydrogen meters, which not many exist at the moment, to the injection of hydrogen into the national grid, which can cause stratification, etc. So there's a lot of metrology issues associated with clean fuels and renewables. Now, in terms of flow processes, control, measurement, it cuts across all sectors. So you've got non-Newtonian, you've got your food sectors, you've got refineries, pharmaceuticals. So we're seeing much in microfluidics and medical sector. Now, that's another area we have started to address, where there's quite a lot of high fatalities associated with the delivery of intravenous drugs, especially for infants and stroke victims. So that's an area where we're now looking to build more facilities. Right. So in terms of, I thought I would focus on our experts rather than focus on the facilities to us and the sectors. So multi-sector, experts, everything flow. So that brings with it the subsectors of flow measurement, fluid mechanics, fluid dynamics, thermodynamics, fluid properties. We have obviously density facilities, so that plays a big part there. And I think, as Rick was saying earlier, also the data science is becoming quite a big deal for us as well. For all industries, but again, especially in oil and gas, they've got data coming out, the ears left, right, centre, they don't know what to do with it. So it's about trying to take that and provide them more intelligent learning, self-learning, to try and reduce risk. Now, looking at our R&D facilities, and again, I'm trying to draw on, these are not just for oil and gas. We use refined reference model fluids, so gas, water, and liquids, and that could be used. We could basically simulate most fluids across most sectors, so not just the oil and gas sector. So, but look, so in terms of the sectors we cover single phase, so you've got water, oil, gas. We also have multi-phase flows, which is, again, covers a lot of different sectors. It's, again, the arrival of the subsea sector, which due to the advancement of technology is now pushing us to explore and produce very deep sea, deep water. So with multi-phase processes. So oil, water and gas. We also have wet gas. We're now trying to push for clean fuels. So that's trying to exploit more gas from North Sea. And with that, then you have a wet gas. Gas is never quite dry. So there's a lot of metrology measurements and issues there. We have erosive facilities, which again cut across most sectors. And of course, we also have carbon capture and storage, which the recent licensing of the Peterhead facility has now seen that re-emerge. It's not quite the white elephant in the room as yet. We also have different modelling facilities, which can cover, again, so you can look at emissions, atmospheric emissions, dispersions, computational fluid dynamics. And we're currently building the world's first advanced multi-phase flow facility to take up to very high temperatures, 150 degrees, so to mimic more real service conditions. Now, left off the density facility, which is a bit stupid, under microfluidics. We're currently in public consultation about developing a clean fuels laboratory. And in that, you'll talk mainly LNG and hydrogen and carbon capture and storage to add to your current suite. So that's just honing in some of the facilities we currently have. Now, rather than reiterating, obviously, most folk will do, what can we do to help you? obviously to solve metrology challenges that can be associated with production, fiscal measurement, etc. We can support the development testing if there's a metrology element or aspect angled to that. We can optimise measurement systems and performance. So, for example, we can reduce measurement uncertainty. And for certain industries that can, I mean, the oil and gas sector in the UK is exposed to billions of pounds for every measurement uncertainty, and that obviously hits the taxpayer. So to reduce that alone obviously has a major impact. We can improve product performance across the full chain, and that obviously comes with that reducing risk, reducing cost. I think that the main thing across all the is the different experts, engineers and researchers are bringing with them the latest technologies and innovations to help you solve solutions. But just very last, on the last slide, I think you lose the last version, right? But we'll. That. I think that's like, this was going to be a slide for this. That was going to be the last slide. That was just to show your current project under the A4I pilot, if you like, mini project. Now, this was looking at solving a measurement challenge in the oil and gas. It's a bit more than leakage, and this product is being developed to retrofit clamp around pipelines, submerged pipelines offshore, and initially it'll be for a lot of different sectors where there's a lot of theft, which it happens quite regularly in oil and gas hydrocarbon pipelines, and it's quite heart-wrenching actually. A lot of the countries I've been to, a lot of poorer countries, you're seeing hydrocarbon pipelines being tapped into, and very poor health and safety pipelines take them to very poor villages. So that's happening around the world actually, not so much in the UK, but it is. So this device will help very quickly communicate if there's a loss of that via the cloud. So this is a very new innovation. So that's the current project we're working on. I think that's that. Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Lynn. And yeah, again, I'd never seen something on the scale of fluids testing facilities when I went to East Kilbride the first time. It's amazing how that can be reconfigured to solve and analyse different problems. Okay, next it's Glenys Tellett from NPL. And just a reminder again, when you put your problem into us for this, you don't need to, and we don't want you to suggest which partner you're working with, right? Because absolutely, we've had cases in the past where people think they're going to work with one partner and actually two partners can help, and with two different complementary approaches. So it's in your interest not to prejudge that, and it's completely unnecessary in the process, and we prefer you didn't. Right, Glenys. Bend this back into position and encourage everybody to speak to the microphone.
Just stay still. I'll try to stay still. My name's Glenys Tellett. I'm standing here representing NPL in the A4I programme. It's a programme we absolutely love. We love to hear your problems, and our scientists love to work on them because there's always a challenge. There's always a challenge there. And we currently, at this point in time today, have about 50 projects ongoing. And we often work with other partners. So the project that you just talked about was one that we're actually co-working with NEL on. So often there's complementary expertise, and you'll end up with perhaps more than one laboratory working on your problem. We have a National Physical Laboratory has a small office in Scotland, and it has a small office in Huddersfield, but we're mostly based in southwest London. So we have around 700, 800 engineers, scientists, biologists, all working on measurement and analysis. So that really is our prime focus as an organisation. The sectors that we focus on are advanced manufacturing. That's by far the largest sector for us, but also energy and environment and health. We're used to working with business. Year we're probably directly interacting with about 400 businesses in collaborative way, or selling them products and services. And our customers tell us that they use a measurement is an absolute core part of their business. They're using measurement to check goods in, that products that are coming in from their supply chain and meeting specification. They're using them during processing for process control. They're checking the performance of products once they get into service using measurement, and they're also using measurement to develop innovative new products and check that new products perform better than the ones that went before. So it's an integral part of that product development. Rather than tell you about our structure, I'm going to just give you some stories, because I think that that's perhaps the easiest way for me to tell you about the kinds of things that MPL does. King of Shaves is the example here. They actually have razor blades. They're quite highly specified technical products that come in that they assemble into razor blades. So they're a market entrant a few years ago, King of Shaves, to challenge some of the big names. And they came to us because they need this quality control of those blades coming in. And it's actually quite a hard thing to measure that sharpness and that performance of that blade. And they had to do it quickly because you've got a lot of razor blades coming in any particular day. So it has to be a cheap, fast program for them. With how to test these blades and how to use a coordinate measurement machine on them. So another example here, small company, Spartan, make wetsuits. They came to us because they wanted to understand how good their wetsuits were, whether there were parts of their wetsuits which were losing heat more quickly than others. So we were doing in the field tests and doing laboratory tests to help them understand their product better. Another example here, we do quite a bit of work in renewables, particularly on a site like this. We might be doing the underwater acoustic testing to look at how much noise there is out there disturbing wildlife. But we also do work on the grid, on power network stability. So the grid has been designed for big power stations sitting at various strategic locations. It's not designed for PV cells boosting up when the sun comes out, or a sudden squall of wind giving you a surge of energy. So the last thing that the UK needs is power dropping out, or even worse, surges of power. So the power quality is really important. That's something that we're actively working on. Another example here, we use electromagnetic technology, in this instance with Burberry, to look at counterfeiting. So the kind of construction of your fabric can be detected with electromagnetic technology and can spot a counterfeit Burberry bag from a real one. The thing we most like was this is our one and only article ever in Vogue. So, so Vogue magazine's not a common publication area for us, but you know, we got in that time. Next example, this is the red piece you see there. That's an anthrax area. Don't worry, I haven't bought any samples. But it's being attacked by a white blood cell there. So one of the areas where we're strong is imaging. But the thing that we're trying to do here that's new is not just image the physical structure of this, but also to plot the chemistry across that so we can analyze what's going on there. And that really helps in the development of new pharmaceuticals and the understanding of how medicine's working. Just to jump back to our products and services, if you didn't do A4I to us, you'd probably be doing one of these 4 things. Instrumentation, we do manufacture. It's not one where instruments that you're going to be buying 10,000 of. It's generally 1 or 2 off things that are quite high specification. Calibration is the most likely thing that you would buy from us. So also with our other sister laboratories, we're under Eligibility in the UK. So if you buy a kilo of apples at your supermarket, you know that all traces back to MPL that's telling you, yes, you have got a kilo of apples. And training is another focus. So helping shop floor workers to understand how to use verniers and calipers, that kind of thing. So there's a whole suite of both online and face-to-face. So how are we helping companies? Well, there's a whole range of things that I alluded to earlier, but we're helping companies with getting that manufacturing process right, with right first time production, and removing inefficient measurement processes or inappropriate measurement processes. In A4I, we have come across companies that have a measurement process in place that's telling them nothing. It's not telling them actually whether products or bad or a process is working or not. So if it's not doing anything, then you might as well get rid of it. We also help companies bring innovative products more quickly to market. So often proving it does what it says on the can. So if you've got a new and innovative product, you need that data and that credibility that the product actually works and does what it says it does on the can. So a lot of companies, even companies through this A4I process, find themselves in a much more investable situation as a result of participating. Just some of the areas that we work in. I can't talk about them all. There's just too much. But to pick out a couple, if you've ever had radiotherapy or been unfortunate enough to have radiotherapy, that radiotherapy is linked back to MPL in terms of the dose you receive. And we have a clinical LINAC on site for experimentation. Electrochemistry, we work a lot on battery technology. So that's one of our expertise. Time and frequency, you might think, well, who on earth is using time and frequency? But if you ever use a sat-nav system that's making great use of time and frequency measurements, and also we're working with the city to timestamp trades very accurately, because unless you get the price is changing with time, so they need accuracy of who sold first. But I guess even more important than the kit is the people that we. So if you look over at this data, you probably see within that name data that we have one of the world's biometric experts and run loads of trials and comparisons of different biometric techniques within MPL, looking at thumbprint versus face recognition, etc. Just a few past projects within A4I that we have here. So first one, Precision Products UK, was a very traditional manufacturing process control issue. They had an electroplating line. They had a huge back order, but that electroplating line was holding up all of their delivery. It was the bottleneck within the manufacturing plant. So we helped them to speed up that process by doing some measurements to make sure that if they plated faster, the performance is retained and it has the same properties. Also, intelligent fingerprinting, really good project. The company had been struggling with measuring a fingerprint. And why do they want to do that? It's because they're looking for drugs and they're looking for explosives within the fingerprint. And they want to measure the volume so they know the concentration. So before, they only had a yes, no, is there a trace there or not? They could not tell the concentration in the fingerprint. And apparently this had been a problem for the Home Office that they've been wrangling with for the last 20 years. And they came to see us and we solved it within 6 weeks. Absolutely unbelievable. Company has now 4 patents based on that technology. So some really good projects that have been really fantastic for the companies involved and really good for us because we love to see these meaty problems. I would encourage you to apply, even if you think your project isn't particularly high tech, because sometimes very practical problems can be solved with technology. So we're working with one company, small company, who's trying to make hay bales systematic so they can sell them into the marketplace. One of the problems they've got is knowing how much moisture is inside that hay bale. So again, there's technology out there that even to support them with really quite a low tech product. Anyway, good luck in your applications.
Dennis, and now it's Paula from the National Management Laboratory at LGC. Press the button.
There we go. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Paula Doman. I'm the Strategy and Impact Team Leader at the National Measurement Laboratory at LGC. We're actually based on the same campus as MPL in southwest London, though we do have a sales laboratory in Cambridge. Our setup at the National Measurement Laboratory is made up of 4 sub-laboratories. So in organic analysis, where we're looking at anything from sort of small molecules right through to proteins. and we're looking at them in terms of their structural composition, their purity, and the different forms that they take. And then within our laboratory, we're looking at sort of metals, metal imaging, nanoparticles, isotope ratio measurements, metal speciation, so a whole scope of different things within our inorganic laboratory. And then on molecular and cell biology, we're looking at quantifying and sequencing DNA and RNA, epigenetic measurements, and all the measurements that go around cell measurement. These are some sort of facts and figures about the National Measurement Laboratory. So as sort of Glenys alluded to, we sort of help the harmonisation of measurement, both within the UK, but also we work globally with other national measurement laboratories around the world to make sure we have a cholesterol test in the UK. It's the same measurement that would be made in the States or in China. And for our area of designation, we're one of the top 3 institutes in the world, which we're really quite proud of because we're quite small by comparison to some of the other labs that work in our space. We're 80 scientists, 75% of them have PhDs. And we have sort of a lot of accreditation. I'm not going to go into the detail of which, but around sort of calibration, reference material production. And in the area of sort of quantification, that's an example of where sort of globally leading. One of the first labs in the world to be ISO accredited for the calibration of the amount of DNA present. And you actually see why that's useful when I show one of the case studies later. And within our labs, we've got over 20 different types of mass spectrometers. And for the type of work that we do, we're one of the most diversely equipped labs in the UK. And as I said, we're based at LGC, although some of you may have heard of LGC in a different context. LGC was privatised from government in 1991 and has gone on to make itself a sort of a global life sciences and standards company. However, we hold these unique roles of the National Measurement Laboratory, designated for chemical and biomeasurement, and we also have the government chemist function, which is a bit of a quirky function. It's we act as an arbitrator in cases around sort of food and feed to try and stop cases actually going through to court. We analyse a portion of sample and try and resolve those cases, saving huge legal costs and a drawn-out process. Obviously, with things that are perishable like foods, it's really important that these cases can be resolved as quickly as possible. And under the function will act as an advisor around that interface between legislation and analytical science. In terms of the type of work that we do, majority of which is research, but we also have calibration facilities that people can access, training and consultancy, and sort of higher order reference materials that we produce. I put up the two main sectors that we work in, but please don't feel that this is don't feel constrained by this list. If your problem sits outside, please still send your problem in. Due to our designation, a large proportion of the work that we do is in the sector in terms of supporting advanced therapeutics. That's sort of large proteins, cell and gene therapies, ensuring safety and efficacy of product. And then also in terms of diagnostics, the sort of validating new biomarkers that have been discovered or actually helping products translate through to the marketplace. And these are some of the sort of the challenges that we address. So infectious diseases and antimicrobial resistance, chronic diseases such as cancer and heart disease. And we have a large portion of work also on neurodegenerative disease. The other sector, we've sort of grouped a few probably subsectors together and called it safety and security. So that's food, environment, forensic science and border controls and consumer safety. Here we're addressing sort of food, authenticity and safety work looking at allergens, environmental protection. So we worked on redefining water framework directive to make sure that the measurements were at a level where people could actually detect them and informed and actually got changes made to that directive. And border control, working with the Home Office to look at the technologies that are used at border control. And I put up a number of case studies on previous analysis for Innovators projects. This first one is from a company called Systemic. They had an assay to test the safety of novel cell-based therapies based on RNA detection. However, if you have even a small amount of contamination in a cell-based product, it can have really adverse effects on the patient. And so for that reason, the regulatory limits are very low and challenging to measure. And as we have this calibration facility for DNA and nucleic acid measurement, and we were able to provide accurate nucleic acid measurements at and below the required regulatory levels across what they were doing. This ensured that they had the right product specification ahead of going to market. This is a really successful project for them. On the back of that, they had a new product release in early 2018, a new licensing deal that was signed with a major cell therapeutics company. And on the back of that, 2 new jobs were created. Another completely different case study is a project that we had from the Coconut Collaborative. One of their raw materials was coconut cream, which comes in barrels. And they had no sort of fast screening approach to actually check whether the barrels of coconut cream they were getting were rancid or not. So together with STFC, we looked at a number of different approaches for screening these barrels of coconut cream. And from that, we realized that one of the methods that we looked at, which was multispectral imaging, actually was fit for purpose for what they wanted to do. Because of that, the whole process could be automated. So some poor person wasn't having to taste every barrel of coconut cream like they had been before. And they could automate the whole production line. They said on the back of that, they've saved £500,000 and also prevented any sort of reputational risk that would have caused if rancid coconut cream had got into their product. And the final case study, Southwest Sensors, here today. They have a novel wearable sensor device. They wanted to extend the capabilities, and working together with them, we developed a magnetic bead-based cortisol assay to incorporate into their sensor. And as a result, they're now sort of got clinical trials that they're carrying out this year and have appointed a new CEO to drive commercialization. Is that all right? Good. And today also another one of our projects is actually here to present. I have to apologise. I'm going to actually have to dash off now. I've just got a message that I've had a bit of a family emergency, so I'm going to have to leave. But yeah, please give any sort of questions or things you may want to ask around the work that we do. My colleague Hayley, who's sitting there, will be around the rest of the day. So please feel free to talk to her about the projects you may be interested in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paula, and hope all goes well. So that's really good. I hope you've seen the breadth now, some of the breadth of what these partners offer, and it can really help all sorts of problems that you may not have. We know that companies have problems that they don't have the sort of scientists sitting there waiting to solve that are available in these partner labs, and I've been totally impressed in final meetings of these projects so far about what people have been able to do, innovative approaches. The innovative R&D in this comes largely from the partners, and I'm so grateful to them for being a part of it. Next, I'm really pleased just to slip in. We haven't been able to do this in the road shows, but that we did before this launch event. But for this launch event, to invite one of the companies who's been benefiting from A4I in a previous round as a sort of brief case. So if Rain Longhurst would like to come up from AQR and just tell you a bit about what the process was like and the benefits for them. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. As Jonathan has kindly just introduced me, I'm just going to give you a very brief case study about how the process benefited us. I have to apologise in advance in that my slides are very prescriptive. In typical Innovate UK fashion, I've been told what to say and how to say it, and I've got to fit it all into 10 minutes. So here we go. Our project was all about measuring hydroxyls. other radicals to optimize our unique process. The company has developed a novel AQR safe water system that basically makes fluids safe. We are a disinfection process. We use very little power per unit, and I'm talking the equivalent of a light bulb. We don't use any added chemicals, and our units are designed so that they can be modular for all types of applications, from very small scale up to the larger fluid treatment. And we've spent a number of years working in pilot trials, in industry situations, and we've collected a lot of data and technical information that proves that our system works. But we still lacked technical ability. Being a very small micro SME with a disruptive technology, we didn't have the confidence to go for particular contracts, particularly applications, because we didn't have the credibility. We knew that we were not an ozone system, but we couldn't prove it. We had a lack of understanding about what we were generating. We knew that the cause and effect was positive, and we knew that we generated a suite of radicals, but we didn't know what they were, and we wanted to make sure that we were actually generating them. And it was all to do with enhancing the products that we were developing, and also that it was restricting the markets that we could access because we didn't have the confidence. We had a batch process, and nearly every fluid industry out there requires a single pass. And we wanted to enable our technology to access some high value markets. As we've heard this morning, it's a two-stage process. And being a technology company, the first challenge for us was to get everything into a very succinct, articulate problem clarification in a very short space of time to get across to the partners what our problem was, and then to enable them to understand exactly what we wanted. And then, of course, phase 2 is a very formal, normal application. But we also were not quite sure, even at the brokerage event where the partners had already been identified, whether A, we were speaking to the right people, did they really understand what we wanted, and did they have the solution? Because in a lot of cases, companies and research partners don't speak the same language, and it's quite frustrating on both sides not to get your point across. We're based in Daresbury, we're based on the Innovation Campus, and across the road is STFC. And for 6 years, we've been trying to explain the problems that we've had to identify the solutions, and we just couldn't communicate effectively. So we worked with LGC. This was around one A4I, so we're talking at least 2 years ago when we submitted the application. And basically what we did together was we developed a method that was able to capture our radicals, and I'm talking about a radical that lives for 10 to the minus 9 seconds, so it doesn't live very long, and it travels fast. So how do you know you've got it? And when you've got it, how do you know it's going to still be there? But luckily, there was a method out there that was able to capture it, measure it, and confirm that we had it, and we were generating it. I guess in terms of mutual benefit for both partners, because for the company, it's relatively easy to see what the benefit of working with the partner can be. But I think in our case, for us, there was a benefit to the partner because a lot of these lab-based instruments have perhaps limited application in that they can't be taken out into the field. So there was a need to develop something that was very transportable, very robust, that could be used in the field, which obviously enabled the partner and will enable the partner to actually provide a service that's outside of that clinical laboratory environment. So for us, there's a mutual benefit for both. We obviously, as part of the project, and as Jonathan mentioned earlier, there's a need to actually be actively involved with the partner. So we spent quite a lot of time with LGC at the LGC site. We developed quite a number of rigs, which we were able to take to the partner. And I think as part of this program, it's important that whatever the company has, you can actually work together on it tangibly. And luckily for us, the project was successful, and LGC were able to confirm that we do, in fact, generate the type of radical that we generate that is 1,000,000 times better than existing oxidation disinfection products, i.e. ozone. So at the end of it, we got quite a lot out of the project because basically we had a validation world-leading partner that we otherwise would not have been able to work with to confirm that our technology did what we thought it did, which gave us confidence. And it did open up new markets. For instance, we now have a contract that we would not previously have the confidence to bid for. And we're currently working with a leading water company, which has a potential impact of generating a few millions revenue for us in the longer term, which we would never have been able to bid for in the past. And I think in our phase 2 application, Jonathan mentioned that it's important to put an actual value, estimated value on what the return could be. I think we underestimated it. I can't remember what we put, but I do think we actually did underestimate the value. We also have a strong ongoing relationship with our partner. So out with the project, it's enabled us to develop that relationship because we do have a development program that we're discussing with the partner. We were lucky in that we had a very good collaborative team. Both parties were recognised and confidently worked together. And as I say, it gave us, or maybe I wouldn't say a full understanding, but it gave us a better understanding of what we do and what we generate, and having the confidence to communicate to clients that we do offer a competitively advantageous solution compared to other disinfection processes. We're also thinking about putting around A4I application in, because with solving any kind of problem, you open a Pandora's box. We've solved one problem, but we've actually stumbled upon a lot more problems. The contract that we're working with at the moment has a particular problem to quality that what we now don't understand is that with any new novel disruptive technology in the marketplace, are we causing any undue, unwanted effects that perhaps we hadn't thought about before? I.e. with chlorine, you have chlorine disinfection byproducts which are carcinogenic. We don't use chlorine, we don't use any kind of chemicals, but because we break down chemicals in the water, are we producing anything that perhaps has previously been unknown? And we need to eradicate that and make sure that we're not introducing anything horrible with our process. We can make it clean, we can make it clear, but that doesn't necessarily make it safe. So that's a very brief overview of our experience with working with the A4I. I think it's benefited us immensely, and we look forward to doing more both with Innovate UK and our partner.
Okay, thank you very much, Ray. That's great. We could have actually lots of companies were willing to come and talk. It was a limited time, but I hope that gives you a feel for it. We don't tell Rain exactly what to say. I mean, there was a template for the slide, but you know, you could say some other things as well. No, to be serious, you know, it's indicative of the sorts of relationships that have been built through this program between partners and companies, and I think that's the important thing that comes out of that for me. Our partners are used to working with companies, right? They're used to understanding problems. It's really nice, as Glenn has alluded to, that some of these scientists can work on real problems that have, you know, a real meaning, like the coconut one. I mean, even my mum understands she doesn't understand a lot of what I fund, but you know, the coconut cream one she could understand, and it just makes a difference to the real world, you know, and it's not just an academic research project. So it's all good reasons to get involved. Okay, so the last session before we do Q&A and lunch and stuff, we're a little behind, but I'm more keen that we understand what's going on here and everybody's clear. I'd like to ask Joe Lyford from our operations team in Innovate UK. whilst I come up with these groovy ideas of new schemes to run and how different they can be from the previous ones, Joe has to make sure that we obey all the state aid rules and that I don't do anything that's not allowed and stuff like that. So I'm really pleased that he's here to answer all the difficult questions today. Now he's going to talk you through the actual process. What do you have to do to submit a problem?
Okay, thank you very much, Jonathan. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joel Lyford. I'm a senior portfolio manager as part of our competitions team at Innovate UK. Effectively, in my role, I manage the end-to-end competition process for a number of programs across a number of sector areas, including analysis for innovators. So I'll be managing the competition process up to the point that successful applicants actually begin working on their projects after the end of phase 2. So as Jonathan mentioned, I'll be covering the process elements today. In other words, the kind of boring stuff that people still tend to get wrong. So it's very important to cover anyway. And this will include the process of actually applying for the competition through our innovation funding service. So on this first slide, we have I suppose, of the key eligibility criteria that are in place for this competition. It's relatively straightforward at this stage. The lead must be a UK-based business. You must carry out the project work in the UK and intend to exploit the results in or from the UK as well. Project cost, this is for phase 2, not the expression of interest that we're talking about today, but for phase 2, project cost can be up to £300,000. And there's a note that I've made at the bottom here, just in terms of the number of submissions that you can make, because obviously this is very important as well. Any one business can submit a maximum of 2 different problems to this round of the Analysis for Innovators competition. These criteria are relatively straightforward and simple. However, if you do not comply with these criteria, you will be ruled out straight away. What we want to avoid is applicants spending a lot of time and putting effort into making an application and ultimately falling at the first hurdle due to not complying with the eligibility criteria. So we do actually conduct a check on all of the submissions once the competition closes to ensure they do comply with these criteria, and we do remove any proposals which don't fit the parameters. So please make sure you comply with these. This next slide is about eligibility for state. Only really applies to the second phase of the competition when it comes to actually talking about project cost and on your grant as well. But I thought it's worth mentioning here today as well, because it is very important. So any business that claims funding must be eligible to receive state aid at the time we confirm you will be awarded with the funding for your project. And we do actually test this as part of our viability checks that are carried out by our project finance team once successful projects have been notified, and there's a fair amount of due diligence that goes into the process. This is one of the things that we do check. And I would recommend, given the complexities around state aid, that you do potentially seek legal advice if you're unsure whether you are eligible to receive state aid. And in addition, as you'll see at the bottom of the screen, there is a link to the general guidance for applicants on our website, which has quite in detail as well about state aid rules and regulations and that kind of thing. So please do have a look on our website for further information if you're unsure as to whether you're going to be eligible to receive grant from this competition. On this next slide, we just have another regulation that you'll need to comply with in order to actually receive funding as part of this program. Essentially, what we're saying here is that you must have properly concluded any current existing Innovate UK funded project with an outstanding independent accountant's report before we can give you any further funding, i.e. through this program or indeed any other competitions that are currently live. Although what I will say is that you will, or indeed you should know whether this actually applies to you or not. This is we don't really see too many cases of this where there are outstanding requirements from a current project which would therefore prevent you from receiving additional funding from a new project. This next slide just summarizes again the key dates to bear in mind for this competition, and I'm sure Jonathan's already taken you through these earlier. So the key ones that we've highlighted here are firstly the submission deadline for the expression of interest phase of this competition, which is on the 20th of March. And then importantly, again, the phase 2 submission deadline for the next stage of the competition, which closes on Wednesday, the 5th of June. Very important here that the submission deadline for both phases of the competition will be noon on the dot, and that is a really, really hard deadline that I need to emphasize. So the Innovation Funding Service, which is what we use to manage both phases of the competition, physically shuts at noon. There's nothing I can do about it, I'm afraid. So if you try to submit your application a few seconds after the noon deadline, I'm afraid the system simply won't allow it. So we do recommend, as always, that you submit your applications as early as possible to make sure you get them in on time and avoid any last minute technical issues. On this next slide, I've literally from the guidance that we have online, but I thought it's probably worth just summarizing it if there was any confusion perhaps with regards to the process of having the two phases for this competition. So once we have the deadline for the expression of interest phase of this competition, there will be, as I mentioned before, an eligibility check on all submissions and also a scope check as well, just to ensure that all projects that we have received are both eligible and in scope for the competition. There will then be an independent panel of experts who will assess whether the problem is suitable as part of this program. And the partner organizations will then assess whether they have a potential approach to solving the problems that have been proposed by applicants who have applied for this competition. If you are not successful in applying for this program, you will receive feedback explaining why the problem was not selected. So you will still receive some feedback, even if you are not successful in applying, which will hopefully help you potentially in the future as well, if you perhaps wanted to apply into a future round of a competition. And then if you are successful at this stage, you will be invited to attend sessions with one or more of the partners that are working as part of this program, and the invitations will be issued by the Knowledge Transfer Network. If you are then selected and are able to put together a proposal to submit into phase 2 of the competition, there will be a separate competition set up in the Innovation Funding Service. So the same system as before, and you will simply be provided with a link to actually go into the system and then work on your application for the second phase of the competition. Okay, moving on to the actual application process we have in place for this competition, which I mentioned is running through the Innovation Funding Service. You may or may not be familiar with the platform already. I suspect if you've applied for funding over the last couple of years, you probably will already have used the Innovation Funding Service. It is the platform that we use for, I'd say, about 90% of the competitions that we actually run at Innovate UK. So firstly, if you haven't already, you can actually find the competition page on our website under the funding opportunities section. You are able to click on the competition to see a tabbed view of the competition, including information such as the eligibility criteria, the scope information, the key dates that we have in place again, and some information on how to actually apply as well. So on that page, you have literally every single bit of information you should need to apply for the competition available to you in one tidy place. And when you're happy to apply, if you are looking to apply, and obviously we hope you do, you can simply click on the Start New Application tab, and that will take you through to the next stage of the Innovation Funding Service, which is when you actually put in information and actually build your application up. In order to apply for any competition using IFS or the Innovation Funding Service, the lead applicant will need to create an account, which is very easy to do. It doesn't take very long at all. If you have applied to previous competitions that have been run through the Innovation Funding Service, simply sign into your existing account and go from there. But as I mentioned, if you haven't used it before, it's very easy to set up an account, and you can actually link it to your business as well by using the Companies House registration lookup feature, just to make sure that you are obviously tied in with the right organization. Once you have logged in, you will see a view similar to what you can screen now. And it's from here really where you can actually set up your application and any team members that may help you with your application as well. So team members are other people from your organization. Obviously, this is just a single applicant at this stage who will be working on the application with you. You can invite them by simply entering their name and email address, and they'll be sent an automatic email, which will then give them access to the application. Very easy to do again. And they can then join the application and actually help you to work on your proposal. You will then be able to actually invite the people to work on the questions that you're answering, and you can ask questions to them for them to have input in as well. And on here as well, you can see that the application overview allows you to see details such as the deadline that you'll need to stick to, as I mentioned before, the progress bar, which will highlight how far you've actually, how much you've completed of your application to date, and also the terms and conditions of the award as well. As I mentioned, when completing your application, you are able to assign questions to other people from your organization for them to have a look at. They will then be able to assign the question to perhaps someone else, if you've got more than a couple of people working on the proposal, for their additional input into the response that you give to the question. Indeed, they can simply mark the section as complete. Once you have marked anything as complete in your application, don't worry if you want to make any further changes to it. You still have the option to go in and make changes and edit the answer if you need to. The Innovation Funding Service also allows you to spell check and format any responses you give to any of the questions. And you're also able to see the word count limit that we have in place for the questions, which is very useful for when you're actually putting your responses together. Importantly as well, you are able to see the online guidance when entering your response to a question. So when you're actually working on the question, you'll see all of the guidance related to that question on the same page that you are on. We do, however, want to stress these don't include any hyperlinks within any responses to any of the questions, as they won't actually work once you've submitted the applications to us. On this next slide, you can just see the application form layout that we have in place for the expression of interest phase. It is relatively straightforward, obviously, given that it's only the expression of interest phase at the moment. So the application form has 3 sections for you to complete. Firstly, the application details, which is some very minor bits of information like the title and the timescales that you have for your proposal. The company summary is the second section here, and also the problem scope, which is obviously very important for us when actually having a look at the scope of all the proposals we receive. So how does your problem actually align with the scope that we have in place for this competition? And as or if it's not in scope, it will unfortunately be ineligible, and we won't be able to proceed with your application. The application questions themselves are also pretty in terms of the number. So we only have 4 application questions in place for this phase of the competition. There will be more if you are successful in reaching the second phase. But for the expression of interest phase, we have 4 questions. The headings are illustrated in the table there. I've not gone into too much detail of what the questions are because the guidance is provided online. It's relatively straightforward. Really, there are 3 questions which I think have a word count limit of 400 words, which are the first 3 questions there. And question 4 is just really for you to provide the link and the password to the video, which would obviously go as part of your application as well. In terms of actually submitting your application to us, once you're happy that you've sections, you do have the option to review any aspect of your application before you submit it to us. As I mentioned before, if you mark any area as complete, it's not a problem. You can go back in and make any changes before you submit. And we do obviously recommend, once again, that you leave plenty of time before actually application to us. When you are ready to submit the application, simply click on the icon. And you'll be taken to this confirmation page, which also outlines the next steps in the process as well. So once you've reached this page, you can sit back and relax and be confident that your application has been successfully submitted and therefore received by us. On this next page, you can see, you might not be able to see it too well from where you are, but the table shows the number of applicants for a previous competition that we ran a year or two ago, I think. The number of applicants submitting their proposals each hour leading up to the noon deadline that we had in place for that competition.
The shape is important.
Very much so. So the image really illustrates the point that I've made throughout the presentation today. As you can see, the majority of applicants do leave it until the final few hours, minutes, seconds to submit the application to us, despite us always suggesting otherwise at these kind of events, and reiterating the point throughout. They still tend to leave it into the last few seconds. We do recommend, once again, time I'll say it, submitting your application perhaps slightly earlier than the last few minutes, in good time to avoid any last minute technical issues. We don't anticipate there ever being any technical issues with the Innovation Funding Service on the day of the submission deadline. However, if you do have any last minute issues or questions at 5 minutes to noon on the deadline, it's obviously very unlikely that you're going to be able to get through to us, firstly, and secondly, that we're going to be able to actually help and resolve any issues for you before you submit it a few minutes later. So, yeah, finally, once again, last time, please give a bit more time before submitting. Once you have submitted an application to us, you can turn to your dashboard page within the Innovation Funding Service, which will show you the status of any applications that you have submitted to us in the past, or indeed started working on any other competition that's linked to your account. Okay, I appreciate that was quite a quick run through of the application process for this competition. That does leave obviously more time now for you to ask any questions of, I think, myself and Jonathan with regards to the scope of this program, or indeed the process of applying.
Okay, thanks, Joe. And just to make the point that, you know, Joe said that don't put hyperlinks in because they won't work in those text boxes. That's not because they don't work, it's because we don't want them to work. We try and give everybody the same space to express yourself in those boxes and the same fair amount of words. So you can't put a load more words on a web page and direct people to it. That's the point of not allowing that. I would just emphasize that the video is mandatory this time. I didn't say it on the slide about differences from other rounds because of the third round was so manic in its timescales. We did make that an option. It's not an option this time round. You do need to submit a video. What you put in it is up to you, but we hope it's about the problem. But you must submit a video, otherwise you'll be out of scope and non-complying. And that is through vimeo.com with a password on it. And there's more guidance in the guidance link that Joe referred to just now. And we did have one poor applicant last time who phoned us up afterwards, sort of 5 minutes later, and said, why didn't my application go in time? And we looked into it and they hadn't pressed the final green submit button. They'd done all the work and hadn't pressed the button. Now, I can't help you with that. Again, you must press the button and get the confirmation that Joe just mentioned. You know, it's soul destroying when people put a good application in and it can't go into the system for that reason. IFS does, you know, lock you out after the noon deadline. So we keep chuckling about how many of us have laid this on thick. I did earlier, and you have as well, thankfully. But people still do it. So that's why we do that. Okay. Any questions? And Simon is looking online as well, I believe, in case there's any there. If you wait for a moment. Okay. Go.
Thank you, Jonathan. I haven't quite got my head around the funding for the partner bit. Are you counting the partners' costs as if they were your own in terms of the grant? So I'm just taking the example here. So Ordnance Survey, we counted a large business. Say we're working with NPL. Say we've got £50,000 of cost. NPL have got £50,000 of cost. the budget's £100,000. Are we claiming 50 and spending 50 between us and Ordnance Survey? I'm trying to make that as simple as possible.
Yeah, I understand. Well, at the moment, for phase one, you don't have any costs, so that's the main point.
Yeah.
Secondly, and we do give you a worked example when we brief you for phase two about how these costs work, so you can see absolutely. But to answer your question, yes, if you're a large company, then it's 50-50, so it's a slightly different, the numbers look different. But effectively, 50% of your 50,000 costs are eligible for grant, right? So your eligible costs of those 50,000 will be at the 50% intervention rate. So you'll get a grant for 50% of your costs from Innovate UK. The partner will pay effectively 50% of their costs, and you will need to find 50% of the other 50% of their costs after the project is finished. And the reason we do that is not so much for large companies, but for small ones. We don't want to cause a cash flow problem with a small company who can get involved in this and having to pay before you get the grant. Okay, but it's like a purchase order to the partner afterwards. But those figures obviously depend on the ratio of the work. You've chosen an equal example there to make it easy. It depends on the ratio of the work, i.e. the amount of costs per partner, per the company and per the partner. And smaller companies obviously get a much, because of the state aid rules, get a higher intervention rate of eligible cost to 70%. So you've understood it correctly, I think.
Okay.
Yep. Anything else? But I would encourage, the reason I'm encouraging you not to think too much about, I understand that people are concerned about the costs of projects, but remember in this program of A4I, by putting a problem in, you're effectively, if you're in scope and the partner can help, you're winning at the first phase without any money being given to any or paid to anybody. You're winning a chance to sit down with these world-class scientists to discuss your problem in the brokerage session. I think that's worth quite a lot of money. So, I'm not allowed to use the consultancy word for state aid reasons, but I think that's a pretty good deal for putting in your 4 questions that Joe just outlined in order to give us a problem. You have a complete choice after that, whether you go ahead and do a project, whether you claim funds from us or pay partners. But at that stage, you're getting to sit down with them without any money changing hands. Yes, Simon, you've got one at the back.
Great.
Online.
I've got the winner question.
Right.
IP.
And I knew somebody would ask.
And
right.
NDA.
Okay. So we understand that these problems are crucial to your business. Usually, they're big problems. Otherwise, you wouldn't apply to A4I with them. Of course, we take the same care we take with any applications in terms of confidentiality for all the competitions, and Joe knows chapter and verse about what we do to ensure that. We double down on that for A4I because we know that these problems are highly competitive in nature sometimes. There's a number of levels to answering this. If I take the application of the problem first of all, if there are things that you don't want to put in a video on vimeo.com, even with a password protection, then you can still put that in words in our secure form. You still need to submit a video, but what you say in there is up to you. You can choose to say anything particularly sensitive if you want, if that's your wish, via the secure text box on the application system. So hopefully there's no problem there. In terms of confidentiality, we operate the same system that we do for all our assessors, where they signed agreements with us that when the assessors look at the problems, that they only look at it for the purposes of this competition. As an individual, they do not talk about or share that content with anybody else outside of their role with Innovate UK on this. Obviously, the chief scientists in the partners need to look at the problems in order to see whether they can help with them. That's the nature of the beast. Again, they are fully briefed and understand the confidentiality aspects of that. In terms of IP, if you do a project, and again, we're getting further down the line into phase 2 here, but I understand people are concerned. So in terms of IP, we've not had, I think we've got best part of 150 projects all told now across the rounds. We've never had an issue with IP. And that's mainly because the IP background on your problems resides with you as a company. The only situation where a partner would want to have a discussion about the IP with you is upfront, and if it involves the IP associated with their measurement process or their technique that they're using on your product. So it's not about your product. If you come with a camera, for example, and you want to make the camera spec better, they may use some techniques on that that they hold the background IP for anyway. On that, that's no different to you going to anybody else and them getting a service, you getting a service from them. But the whole IP associated with your camera and its specifics and its thing resides with you. There is nothing about this program where the partners get involved because they're trying to get IP advantage out of companies. That's not what this program's about, and every partner understands that. You've heard from some of the partners in passing today why they're involved with it. They like to get contacts with with companies, work on real problems with their scientists, and sweat the assets that they've got available, which are very significant. So they're the reasons they get involved, not to swipe IP from companies. So I can't imagine, with having looked at all the projects that we've had so far, there's been no issues with IP at all for those reasons. And I don't envisage there being any beforehand. And I would just say that the IP is covered by a collaboration agreement. We require a collaboration agreement to be in place before you start work. And if the thought of that frightens you or your lawyers, we have templates for A4I projects that have been tried and tested before. Most small companies will accept those, and their lawyers will accept those as is because they're quite straightforward. If your company wants to have a custom built one, then it's up to you to come back to the partners and agree that before you start. But up front, before you start, you know what the costs are and what the IP is and everything else, because it's all in the agreement. Hope that answers or addresses the question. Thank you very much for the question. I normally talk about that if nobody asks. It's just to try and get you asking things. Yes.
Hi.
Down the front.
We have just initiated, and we're very excited about our A4I with LGC. If we have another problem that is unrelated, I just saw on Joe's slide something about a live or project or claim. Does the fact that it hasn't ended yet preclude us from applying for a different one?
Do you want to?
Yeah, so that's only in very few cases where there's not been a proper audit report to conclude the end of a project, rather than there being an existing project. Yeah, it's kind of only for the naughty people that we don't see too often, but it does happen. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always difficult to put the exact wording to me. You're quite right to pick it up. Nigel and I were noticing it on the slide as well. So it's only if the audit report should have been done by now and you haven't done it, right? If you've not finished the project, clearly you've got ongoing projects, you won't have done an audit report because it's not required until the end of some of them. So it's only if one was requested and it hasn't been done, or there was a problem with the audit, that we reserve the right not to give you some more money. But no, it's not intended to stop you applying to this round if you've already got one going from the last round still. Again, thank you for the clarification. Yes, ma'am.
On a similar vein, I have an issue whereby we are actively receiving funding from Innovate UK under a particular business area with its own legal entity. We'd be looking to apply from a different legal entity because the one under that way is in infrastructure, and we'd be looking to apply under utilities. Does that exclude me?
I'll ask Joe in a moment, but my understanding from what you've said is that if you've got a company where it's part of another and you're applying from different parts of the company, it really comes down to who's benefiting from the flow of money. If it's the parent company that benefits from the entire revenues from both streams of the parts of the company, then it will count towards any rule that is about the amounts you can claim, but it shouldn't preclude you per se from applying to this competition just because you've got something else on the go. We're not. There's no general rule that says if you're currently benefiting from another competition that we've run, for example, you've got a grant at the moment with another competition, that you can't apply to this round of this competition. It's only if there are issues with that, or do you want to add?
Well, I was going to say separate entities doing separate bits of work is absolutely fine. It'll be very common across a number of our competitions and programs. As long as there's no overlap, obviously, of cost and resource and grant funding and that kind of thing, then it's absolutely fine.
Brilliant, thank you.
Obviously, you can't dress up a problem for A4I as the same as the work you're doing on another thing, which was just an ordinary program, and you're doing the same work and being funded twice for it. We will check across programs. In fact, we had one in the last round where, you know, the guys who checked this came back to us and the innovation lead from the other program and asked us to look at them both and say, are these the same? And we looked at them, and they're the same company, but it wasn't the same problem, so it's fine. But we do look at those things, yeah. Yep, Simon has another one online. I'm glad there are still people online. Oh, 4 online. Okay.
Yeah, well, I'm going to do a couple. So the first is a quick one, which is there a size restriction on the file size of the video upload for phase 1?
Whatever Vimeo stop you doing, it's on their site.
Cool.
But there will be. I mean, they won't let you upload something infinitely big, but it hasn't been a problem for any applicant so far because they would have told us.
Next one, Max asks, is this suitable for pre-revenue startups?
You can apply to A4I, like most of our other programs, as a pre-revenue startup. The only thing is A4I is designed to work on existing problems and products and services. So if you're pre-revenue and you've got an existing product, process or service out there that has a problem, yes. If your problem is that you haven't got a product, a service or a process yet, no. You can't use this to launch something into the market because most of our other schemes are designed to help you do that. You're going to take a break from the other two? Yeah. Okay. Rain?
I think it was Joe's slides said that if you've had previous projects and you've not exploited the outcomes effectively, then Innovate UK will will not fund any forthcoming future projects. What metrics does Innovate UK look for so that you can demonstrate that companies have successfully exploited previous project outcomes?
Do you want to say that?
Yeah, again, that's you would know if that was you. But you should do anyway. It's the naughty the cases. Typically we don't see it very often, but often we do. That doesn't make sense. We don't see it very often, but you would know if that was you for sure.
I will just say something else because something Nigel and I noticed about that clause on the slide. If you're currently doing a project from A4I or in a previous round and you haven't exploited the results of that yet, that doesn't mean if you didn't plan to, that's okay, right? It's if you've told us you were going to do that and you haven't done it. Again, it's that sort of example that this is we have to reserve the right to deal with the problem where somebody hasn't used the grant effectively or something in the past, and that's really what that clause is in there for. It shouldn't preclude anybody here if they don't know already, as Joe says. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think it's the reason we put that in is that we obviously don't want people to be entirely reliant on grant funding over and over and over again. So that's really the reason why that's in there. So we don't want people to constantly be applying for grant funding to address the same kind of issue over and over again. Because after a certain while, obviously we want people to be able to, businesses to grow and to stand on their own 2 feet. So that's more the reason why.
Yes, it's about not using Innovate UK to sustain your business and ongoing rather than being successful in other ways. So that's fine. Simon.
So I've got 3 here, all on defining value. So
right, okay.
Yeah, so they're slightly different ones. So
Yep.
the first one, Adam Connolly says, can the value be reduced R&D costs? So in their case, devising shortcuts to existing laborious material testing and characterization techniques. That's the
Yes.
first one. Great. So John asks,
Better example than I gave earlier.
Great. So that was Adam. John asks, can the value be a saving to our customers / wider industry rather than a direct efficiency saving for our own business?
Not really. I'm looking for savings to the business because, as I mentioned earlier, this is only open to business. It's not open to other organisations. Other organisations could make those sorts of savings for the world as a whole, or for the environment and stuff like that. I'm really looking to help businesses save money on their bottom line with productivity and competitiveness. So if it doesn't do anything for that at all, as well, but it helps all these other people, then probably not.
So the last one from John would be, would the definition of value include, actually it's pretty much the same one as last time. Yeah, it's just someone's reworded the same one about efficiency savings, but it said we would intend to solve an existing industry problem in financial services and offer a solution as part of our product range. So that's
that sounds like the development of a new service to solve somebody else's problem. Yeah, this is not about defining new services and products to make a new market. This is about something you already do, and you've got a problem with that in some way. And probably something that you've had for some time that you haven't really been able to get to the bottom of. That's the characteristic that describes a lot of the problems we've seen in this program.
So if they had a current product out there for the financial services market sector and they hadn't been able to get to that snag, then this could be.
Yeah, if there's a snag with that particular product for the financial services, I don't rule out the financial services industry, certainly not. But you need to have an existing service or product out there that exhibits the problem that the scientists can get hold of and address. And I think that's the key thing, rather than saying, well, we could solve this problem of, delivering hydrogen to petrol pumps if only we had a safe way of carrying hydrogen. Well, sorry, that's like saying we could do this if we had an app to do it. Well, you haven't got an app, so go and get one, but not through A4I. Okay, good questions. Thank you. Anybody else, or people hungry? You can still ask us over lunch. We'll be here after lunch as well. We'll be here, in fact, most of us, until nobody else has left, because that's our job. Glenys, you're signalling. Hang on, you need to.
I just wanted to check with Joe about the IFS, because we were a bit confused about application last time. So at stage 1, my assumption is you don't talk to a laboratory, you don't invite them to contribute to your application in any way, because it's completely indeterminate then of who's going to help you. But at the second stage, when they're helping you write the plan for the project, it's absolutely appropriate to do so.
Yeah, that's completely correct. So for this initial phase, it will just be a single applicant application. So just your business will be the only organisation as part of your application. For phase 2, you will need to invite one of the partner organisations to join your application, and that's done in a very similar way as I mentioned earlier about just an email address and a name to invite them to join your proposal.
But you can't just invite them if you haven't been introduced to them. It's only the brokerage partners where you will have had some communication and quite a lot of discussion actually with the partner before you start writing a proposal with them. All right. So one of Glenys's MPL scientists doesn't want to receive an invite to work on a project proposal for phase 2 if you've not talked to MPL during the brokerage process, and Nigel hasn't arranged a meeting with those guys, right? That's not allowed. You can't circumvent the process to get discounted help with these problems. And picking up the example that Joe mentioned just now on phase 1, it might be that somebody else in your organization can do that estimate of the value better than you can, and you can do the technical expose of the problem better than they can. So that's why you might want to get 2 different people from the same company involved in IFS by inviting somebody else to take part in that collaborative proposal at the beginning. But it's only 4 questions, so. Okay, one more.
Last question, I promise.
All right.
Last time, the one that's running now for me.
Round 3.
You did consider a product that wasn't yet out in the market. Is that not so anymore?
I knew somebody was going to, yes. Thank you for raising that. Yes, we did. I relaxed like I said, I relaxed the requirement to do a video. I did relax it was very specific. I said, if you've got one remaining problem in order to launch a new product or service, then I will let you use that problem in round 3. That's not the case for round 4. I'm going back to the strictness I had before on rounds 1 and 2. This is a problem-solving process for existing things. I just had to do that for round 3 because I was given this money to use. I didn't want to give it back to government. I wanted to use it for business, and I only had a short time scale to do it. And I thought I was going to get 0 projects, and so I had to relax the thing to get more projects. In fact, I needn't have done it in the end. But you don't know that. I think that's it. Nothing else online at the moment. Okay, so thank you very much to those who've stuck with us online. I do appreciate you joining, even if you can't be here. Some presenters always forget the people who are sitting at home online or in the office or whatever. I do appreciate it. Thank you for your time, and thanks to everybody in the room for your time.